Welcome, gents. The pain you were forced to carry wasn't fair, but what you became because of it is rare. Some boys grow up with love, safety, and reassurance. Others are handed silence, broken promises, and empty rooms. This isn't about which path is better. It's about how the harder one quietly shapes something different. When you're a boy who learns too early that comfort isn't guaranteed, you begin to see the world through a sharper lens. You stop expecting softness. You start relying on your instincts. A brutal childhood doesn't just take, it teaches. It teaches you that people can smile and lie in the same sentence, that not all homes feel like home, that sometimes the only way to protect yourself is to retreat inward. Boys who grow up like this stop waiting for validation because they've already survived without it. They become self-driven, independent thinkers who prefer silence over nonsense and truth over popularity. That's the foundation of a Sigma male. He didn't become distant because he thinks he's better than others. He became distant because closeness always came with conditions. He isn't rebellious just to stand out. He simply refuses to be controlled. And he didn't choose solitude to be dramatic. He chose it because it was the only place that ever felt honest. So if this sounds like you, understand this. You're not broken. You're not cold. You're rare. What you went through didn't destroy you. It trained you. And now the world doesn't quite know what to do with a man who built himself out of nothing. Let's get started, gents. Number one, trust becomes a currency they no longer trade. It's not that they don't feel, it's that they've felt too much, too early, too raw, and often too alone. When the people who were supposed to protect them were the first to break that promise, something changes deep inside. The word trust doesn't carry warmth anymore, it carries weight. And for boys who grow up in that kind of world, trust turns into something sacred, rare, almost extinct. You see, when a boy hears "I love you" from someone who also causes his deepest wounds, his brain splits the meaning of love and trust. He starts to understand that words can sound sweet but be poisoned. So he stops listening to what people say and starts watching what they do. He studies patterns, not apologies, consistency, not charm. By the time he becomes a man, trust is no longer something you get just because you're close to him. It's something you have to prove. Not once, but over time. And even then, he'll never hand it to you fully. He keeps a piece of it locked away just in case. To others, he might seem cold or overly cautious, but they haven't lived the life he lived. They haven't had their heart broken by the very hands that were supposed to hold it safe. They haven't been fed promises and left starving. For a Sigma male, trust is like a vault code. It's earned through loyalty, through showing up when it matters, through actions that outlast words. And once it's broken, there's no fixing it, no second shot, no long speech. He simply detaches and disappears, not out of pettiness, but out of survival. Because once you've had to heal alone as a child, you don't hand over your peace to anyone without making damn sure they won't shatter it. Number two, they stop asking to be loved and start demanding to be respected. When love feels like something you have to earn, twist yourself for, or beg to keep, you learn to stop chasing it. Especially when you're a boy watching love used like a reward system. Be quiet and obedient, you get affection, speak your mind, or show emotion. Suddenly you're a burden. That teaches you something very real, very fast. Love can be taken away, but respect is built, guarded, and demanded on your own terms. For boys who grow up this way, love becomes suspicious. It starts to feel like a setup. A trap with pretty words and hidden strings. So instead of wasting energy trying to be lovable to people who never made them feel safe, they shift their focus. They start building themselves into someone who cannot be dismissed, someone who earns respect without having to plead for it. They stop trying to be the son who's always good enough, the friend who always gives, the boy who bends to avoid conflict. That version of them dies. In its place comes someone much quieter, much sharper, and far less forgiving. Respect is now their language, and not the fake kind that comes from fear or status, but the deep kind that's rooted in boundaries, values, and how they carry themselves. They don't need to be loved to feel whole. They don't need to be liked to sleep well at night. But disrespect them, and they will cut you off mid-sentence. No explanation, no drama. Because for them, being loved with conditions feels like a cage. But being respected from a distance, that's freedom. And they've had enough of feeling small just to stay close to people who never saw their worth in the first place. Number three, They kill their inner child to survive, not in a poetic sense, not in the way people talk about growing up too fast. No, this is different. This is brutal. When a boy is constantly put in situations where his vulnerability is mocked, ignored, or punished, he doesn't just mature, he shuts parts of himself down for good. That playful, wide-eyed version of him, the one who used to ask for hugs, laugh too loud, or cry when things got hard, gets buried early. Not because he wants to lose that softness, but because keeping it alive becomes dangerous. In a house where emotions are ammunition, being gentle is like walking into a war zone without armor. So he adapts. He puts that softness in a box and locks it away. He becomes sharp instead of sensitive, silent instead of expressive. Calm, but not because he's at peace, because he knows exploding won't help. And slowly, people stop seeing the child in him altogether. Years later, when he's grown and carrying himself like a fortress, people ask why he's emotionally detached, why he doesn't open up easily, why he seems so distant even when he's right next to you. They don't get it. They weren't there when he had to pretend he was fine just to avoid getting yelled at. They didn't hear the door slams, the passive-aggressive comments, or the silence that screamed louder than anything. So no, it's not a mystery. That inner child didn't disappear, he was buried. And the man you see now, he's what was left after survival became more important than softness. He doesn't hate emotions. He just learned early on that in some homes, they'll kill your spirit if you let it breathe too loud. So he learned to go quiet, still, controlled. And while others were learning to express, he was learning how to hide what should have been protected. That's not coldness, that's survival. Number 4, they learn to parent themselves way too early. They learn to parent themselves way too early, not because they want to, not because they're mature for their age, but because no one else does it for them. When you're still a child and already carrying emotional weight that would crush some adults, you're forced to grow in places that were never meant to stretch that soon. This kind of boy wakes up in a house where chaos is normal. Maybe a father's anger is louder than reason, or a mother's silence cuts deeper than any insult. Maybe it's neglect. Maybe it's being made to feel invisible. But either way, he quickly realizes no one's coming to check on him. So he starts doing it himself. He becomes his own emotional guardrail. He teaches himself not to cry too loud, not to expect too much, not to lean on anyone for too long. Imagine being 9 and already knowing how to de-escalate an argument between your parents. Or being 12 and figuring out how to hide your report card because there's no room for failure in a house where survival is the priority. That's not independence. That's emotional abandonment dressed as maturity. By the time he hits his teens, he's not focused on popularity or fitting in. He's too busy calculating how to stay out of the line of fire. He walks with caution, speaks with precision, and watches people closely, not for gossip, but for safety. He becomes a Sigma not by choice, but by consequence. He's not emotionally detached. He just doesn't hand over access to his mind and heart easily because he had to protect both by himself for far too long. So when people say he's different or distant or unreadable, what they don't see is a boy who grew up parenting himself. What they don't see is someone who learned how to survive in silence, not for attention, not for rebellion, but because it was the only way to stay sane in a world that never felt safe. Number 5, they develop a secret war chest of pain. Most people will never see it. They'll just see the calm, the control, the guy who rarely loses his cool. But behind that silence is a hidden vault, one that's been filling up since childhood. Every betrayal, every time they were ignored, every promise that was broken, it all gets stored, not talked about, not shown, just quietly packed away and locked deep inside. They don't scream about their pain. They don't throw pity parties or expect the world to notice. Instead, they collect it, like fuel. While some people leak their emotions all over the place, Sigma males compress theirs into power. It's why they keep moving when others fold. Why they can stay focused when things fall apart. They are carrying years of rage, heartbreak, and disappointment, but they've trained it to work for them. Think of a boy who never got an apology from the people who hurt him, or the one who had to act like everything was fine just to survive a toxic home. That boy learned early on that expressing pain was dangerous, so he stopped showing it, but he never forgot how it felt. And now, as a man, that memory drives him like nothing else can. It's why he pushes harder, why he stays up later, why he sets goals in silence and smashes them without broadcasting it. because every time he's told he can't, something sharp and personal wakes up inside him. And he's not just proving others wrong, he's proving to that forgotten version of himself that he's not powerless anymore. So no, his calm isn't emptiness, it's control. And his silence isn't peace, it's a strategy. Because underneath that quiet exterior is a man who's turned pain into purpose, and no one sees it coming until the results speak louder than any revenge ever could. Number 6, they stop relying on authority figures. When the people you're supposed to look up to let you down over and over, something shifts inside you. Parents who were too distracted, too broken, or too selfish. Teachers who belittled instead of built. Religious leaders who preached kindness but practiced judgment. Eventually, you stop buying into the idea that anyone really knows what they're doing. You stop expecting protection, direction, or even honesty from people who wear titles. For boys raised in that kind of environment, trust in authority doesn't fade, it snaps. And once it breaks, they don't go looking for someone else to follow. They start building themselves alone. They begin watching, studying, and learning, not from what people say, but from what people do. If a father says one thing and does another, the lesson sticks. If a teacher plays favorites, the message is clear. If someone talks about God but uses guilt to control others, the pattern is exposed. These boys become experts in seeing the cracks behind the masks. So instead of waiting for a leader to show them the way, they quietly map out their own. They become their own reference point, their own compass, their own coach. They stop waiting for someone to hand them the answers and start figuring out life like a puzzle no one else bothered to finish. That's what makes Sigma males different. They don't need a crowd to follow or a guru to believe in. They trust their own instincts more than anyone's advice, not because they're arrogant, but because authority failed them when it mattered most. And from that failure, they built independence. They don't rebel for attention. They walk away because they've seen what happens when you hand over control to people who never deserved it in the first place. So they keep their head down, make their own moves, and lead themselves, always. Number 7, they've seen the mask behind the mask. Growing up, Sigma males became witnesses to a quiet kind of deception. They saw parents who smiled at neighbors and then shouted behind closed doors. Authority figures who preached kindness but operated with control. Family members who played the role of caretakers but withheld affection like a prize. This double life wasn't just confusing, it was a brutal education. It taught them early that many people wear masks. And sometimes the most charming ones hide the ugliest truths. So they learned to watch carefully, not just faces, but timing, tone, energy shifts, what people don't say. They stopped taking things at face value because face value meant nothing. They noticed how people changed, depending on who was in the room, how apologies came only when consequences showed up, how love was used as leverage. That kind of early exposure makes them dangerous in the best way. As adults, they're not easily impressed. You can't buy their trust with flattery or polished words. They know how manipulation sounds when it's dressed in compliments. They know what performative kindness looks like. And if your story doesn't line up with your actions, they'll spot it before you even finish speaking. People call them guarded, but what they really are is trained. Not by choice, but by necessity. They've seen too many people pretend to care while quietly tearing others apart. So now they live with a built-in lie detector. And when they sense insincerity, they don't argue. They distance. They're not cold, they're just done falling for the same game twice. So if you meet one and wonder why they keep you at arm's length, understand this. It's not personal. They've just seen the mask behind the mask, and they refuse to pretend they haven't. Number 8, they stop believing in rescue. At some point, every boy raised in emotional or physical chaos comes to a hard, quiet truth. No one is coming. There's no comforting adult around the corner, no wise teacher, no family member who suddenly steps in and makes it better. There is only silence. And that silence becomes a teacher. They stop waiting for someone to notice. They stop hoping that someone will step in, offer a hand, or even just ask how they're doing. Eventually they stop asking, not out of pride, but because hope without results starts to feel like humiliation. They begin carrying their weight alone. Not because they want to, but because they have to. This changes everything. While other people grow up believing help is always one call away, they grow up believing survival is a solo job. So they adapt, they build systems around themselves. They rely on logic when emotions get loud. They prepare for the worst because they know what it feels like to fall without a net. As adults, this mindset sets them apart. They don't romanticize rescue. They don't fantasize about being saved or discovered or finally seen. They grind, they plan, they create lives where needing someone isn't a requirement, it's a rare exception. People might call them distant or stubborn, but they don't understand what it's like to cry in the dark and realize no one's coming. That moment rewires something in you. It forces you to either fall apart or rebuild from scratch. And Sigma males rebuild, brick by brick, alone if necessary. Because once you've lived through abandonment in its rawest form, you stop depending on anyone to pull you out again. You build your life so solid that rescue becomes unnecessary. And freedom, that kind that doesn't rely on anyone, is the quiet reward. Number 9, they're slow to open, but fierce when they do. Sigma males don't rush connection. They don't hand out their trust like candy or let just anyone into their inner world. It's not ego, it's experience. When you've grown up being let down by the very people who were supposed to protect you, you learn to treat access to your heart like a locked vault. At first, they may seem distant, hard to read, maybe even uninterested, but what's really happening is calculation, observation. They're watching how you move, how you react when things don't go your way, how you treat people when no one's watching. Because for them, trust isn't about charm, it's about consistency. But here's what most people never get to see. When they finally open that door, when they finally let you in, it means everything. You don't just get a friend or a partner, you get a protector. Someone who has already imagined every way they could fail you and made a quiet vow not to. Their loyalty doesn't show up loud, but it shows up every time. They don't make grand promises, they just deliver. But understand this, that door does not swing open often. And if it ever has to close, it closes for good. If you lie, betray, manipulate, or take their trust for granted, the cutoff is sharp and permanent. Not out of revenge, but out of self-respect. They know how hard it was to open up in the first place. They won't go through that kind of pain twice. So if you've earned the trust of someone like this, protect it like gold. You've been given access to something rare, a loyalty built through fire. And if you haven't, don't take their silence as arrogance. Take it as a quiet warning. This door doesn't open without a reason, and once it closes, it never asks twice. Number 10, they overthink, but it saves them. Most people see overthinking as a flaw, something rooted in fear or self-doubt. But for Sigma males, it's something else entirely. It's not anxiety, it's survival. When you grow up in unpredictable environments where moods shift without warning and words are laced with hidden meaning, you learn to analyze everything. Not for fun, but for safety. They learn to read silence, to remember the exact tone someone used before things went sideways, to replay conversations in their head because that one sentence didn't sit right. They learned how to catch the lie buried inside the smile, how to read the room before stepping into it, and that constant scanning, those mental rewinds, that's how they protected themselves. So now as adults it sticks. They overthink everything, not because they're insecure, but because their brain was wired for patterns. They're always calculating, always rechecking, always preparing for what others don't even see coming. People tell them to relax, to let things go. But they've been burned in moments when they didn't listen to their gut. They've learned the hard way that ignoring the details can cost you everything, your peace, your trust, your safety. So yes, they overthink, but that overthinking has kept them ahead. It has saved them from manipulation, from betrayal, from walking blindly into situations that look harmless on the surface. It's not paranoia, it's precision. They trust their mind because it's been sharpened by necessity. While others move with blind faith, they move with awareness. Their overthinking isn't a weakness, it's their shield, and they wear it without apology. Number 11, they question everything, even love. When you grow up in an environment where love is tied to performance, obedience, or silence, it changes the way you understand affection. For some boys, love wasn't something they could count on. It was a tool, a way to control. One moment they were hugged, the next they were punished for the same thing. One day they were told, "I love you," and the next they were made to feel like a burden. That kind of emotional confusion doesn't fade, it builds armor. As men, they don't fall easily. They don't hear "I love you" and melt. They hear it and pause. They analyze, they test it, not to be difficult, but to protect themselves. Because in their experience, those 3 words have been followed by guilt trips, power plays, or emotional neglect. So now, love has to prove itself. They pay attention to tone, timing, patterns. They remember what was said during arguments more than what was promised after. And if something feels off, they don't ignore it. They start pulling back, not because they want to leave, but because they've learned how dangerous blind trust can be. It's not easy being loved by a man like this. He will test sincerity with silence. He'll measure your words against your actions. He might even push you away just to see if you come back. But if you pass those tests, not with perfection but with consistency, he begins to open up, slowly, carefully. Because when love feels real to him, it means more than it does to most. He's had to build his own definition of it from scratch. So no, he's not cold, he's cautious, he's not unloving. He's just been taught that affection is a currency often used to manipulate. And now as a man, he refuses to let anyone spend love cheaply in his life again. Number 12, they don't hate their past, they study it. At some point, the bitterness fades, the anger quiets down, not because the pain disappeared, but because they stopped letting it control the narrative. Sigma males don't stay stuck in the why me phase forever. They outgrow it. They stop resenting the past and start interrogating it, not with tears, but with clarity. They look back at what hurt them, not to feel it all over again, but to understand it, to trace the patterns, to ask real questions. Why did I tolerate that? What did I ignore? What lesson was buried in that silence? That's how they sharpen themselves. They don't bury the past, they mine it. Most people run from their pain. Sigma males sit with it. They break it open like a blueprint. They study how it shaped their instincts, their habits, their defenses. They see who betrayed them. And instead of carrying that betrayal like baggage, they extract the insight. This is what dishonesty looks like. This is what manipulation sounds like. Never again. Their past becomes more than memory. It becomes data, strategy, a training ground. What used to be a wound turns into a weapon, but not one they use to hurt others. One they use to protect themselves and move with precision. So when you meet a Sigma male and sense that quiet strength in him, know this. It didn't come from nowhere. It came from years of replaying pain, not to suffer from it, but to understand its language. He's not defined by his past, but he's fluent in it. And that fluency makes him dangerous in the best way. Because the things that once tried to break him now serve him. The past didn't win, it just taught him how to aim better. In final words, some boys survive childhood, others are forged by it. If you see yourself in these words, understand this. You didn't become a Sigma male by accident. While others were protected, you were tested. While others were taught, you had to teach yourself. You didn't get soft landings, you got hard lessons and you learned them well. You are not cold, you are careful, you are not distant, you are selective, you are not broken, you are built. Everything you lacked growing up, safety, consistency, real love, you learn to create within yourself. You stopped depending on others because they kept letting you down. You stopped explaining your pain because no one listened when it mattered. And instead of letting that destroy you, you used it to sharpen your instincts, build your values, and walk a path most men couldn't even survive. That's what makes you a Sigma male. You don't follow the herd because you know where blind loyalty leads. You don't chase attention because you've already lived in silence. You don't pretend to be perfect, you just refuse to be fake. There is wisdom in your quiet. There is strength in your calm. There is power in your ability to carry what others would crumble under. So if you ever wonder why you move differently, why you feel out of place in shallow circles, or why you demand more from life than most, know this: you are not lost. You're rare. And everything they overlooked in you is exactly what makes you unforgettable. Keep going. You are not becoming. You are. Thank you for watching, gents, and God bless you.